Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it. And if you don't want to miss any future videos, make sure you subscribe below. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. And so we're going to start with this update from Cannavestments. As we've been through the ringer with Minnesota, 13 Senate committees, 15 House committees, full House vote, full Senate vote, reconciliation between House and Senate bills, and the governor plans to sign the bill into law this week. That will make Minnesota the 23rd state to legalize. And so I'll put the link in the description for marijuana in a moment, but thank you, Cannavestments, for summarizing all that we've been through since the start of the year. But more on that summary, we have NORML as Minnesota lawmakers finalize adult use legalization language, prepare to send it to the governor's desk. And so a lot of the details are included in here. If you wanted to pause to read, I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I invite you to do that if you're interested, but can also scroll down and add a few other things. Main thing to highlight, existing medical cannabis dispensaries will be able to apply for a fee, of course, for dual licensure to sell to the adult use market beginning this summer, which is set to launch July 1st, and that will give MSOs in the state of Minnesota a head start as state regulators must start approving additional cannabis dispensaries by July 1st, 2024. And I do believe in Minnesota you have Goodness Growth, and then you have GreenThumb Industries that are set to capitalize the most on that. And so move forward though, just highlighting NPR, sharing what is happening in Missouri since they've launched their legal adult use market in January, is legal weed sales in Missouri have passed the 1 billion mark, a pretty remarkable milestone. While I've shared this many times, just sharing it from a different source because more people are realizing the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition. Obviously, in just 3 months of rec cannabis, Missouri's emerging industry surpassed 1 billion in sales. Trade experts say the state has managed to avoid the problems that plagued many other East Coast industries that focus on social equity and, sadly, policy that effectively ruins the industry in the long run, like Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and other things such as long lines, limited access, and high taxes. And so, not going to read through this whole thing, but just invite you to read through it if you don't know what's happening in Missouri or if you happen to be interested. Full link in the description. And with that, I wanted to share this updated Senate schedule for the rest of the year, because apparently the schedule that I shared in my Sunday video wasn't entirely accurate, much like some of the claims that source made. So my bad for sharing that. I should have dug a bit deeper, but fortunately Don Murphy did send me this, which does show us that the Senate is in fact in session for a lot more than 9 days going forward, which is more promising, discrediting what that source said. But also, if we put ourselves on May 11th, this gives us 45 days potentially until we hear something, which gives us closer to the end of June, around June 25th. And so just to share what Don Murphy sent me in that same message, although there is no rule that says a markup can't occur before the end of the witness response period, so SAFE could move before the 45 days are up. Good news. It could move before. Obviously, that doesn't mean that it will, and be prepared that it won't, but that will bring us to roughly around this area when we're getting some news. End of June, early July, and so I would say that's promising. Well, wanted to share some updates from Nat Svertig, who covers cannabis policy for Politico, and we do thank you, Nat, despite we wish you would dig a bit deeper. You are on the ground talking to those politicians for us, and she claims, also, Senator Kevin Cramer told me the issues that Republicans have with SAFE, this is so embarrassing, isn't so much the details of the bill, but that there's a general discomfort with the topic of cannabis. Get over it, look at the new data, and you won't be so uncomfortable. So great on you, Faith, for calling them out. I can see why he's uncomfortable. 10% of the country does not want safe banking. Scary stuff. I mean, if politicians acted in favor of 90% of Americans, you think that'd be something to celebrate, and we might actually look at politicians in somewhat of a positive light for once, right? And if that wasn't enough, we just want safe as it is, because it seems like adding more to it is going to likely mean that we will not have the votes. We get this from Marijuana in a moment as Senator pushes cannabis banking bill amendment, of course, trying to add more to provide industry access to small business administrative services. And trust, we've wanted this for the last 2.5 years, especially for the social equity entrepreneurs and the industry as a whole after all the lies that they've been fed. But when you have the votes to pass the basic banking bill, then you go on to adding amendments that could potentially reduce the number of votes you have to get the bill passed in general. It seems like the Dems playbook is to just shoot themselves in the foot at the expense of the American people. And let's just hope this does not let great become the enemy of good in getting something done. But we see Senator Jackie Rosen insisting lawmakers must fully support legal operating cannabis businesses, and that means giving them access to SBA loans and resources. And we know that that just makes it more difficult to get any incremental thing done in the near term. And so you can pause to read a little bit more about what Jackie is spouting on about. But main thing I wanted to bring you down to is that as the senator's legislation was incorporated into a comprehensive cannabis legalization bill filed by Schmuck Schumer last year, and we all know how that went, it was dead on arrival because it was garbage policy and it was a complete waste of time. And so, Jackie, please don't try and push an amendment that's going to make it so that we don't even even get SAFE or the money for expungements we've been waiting on because you're trying to make it great when all we can get past is good with the votes at the moment. But more better news for Marijuana Moment, as cannabis is associated with significant and sustained health improvements. Yeah, no shit. American Medical Association study finds as they're willing to finally admit. So we love to see this. As researchers carried out a retrospective case series analysis that involved 3,148 people in Australia who were prescribed medical cannabis for the treatment of certain eligible conditions. For all 8 well-being indicators that were tested, cannabis appeared to help, with adverse side effects that were rarely serious, according to the study published last week in the Journal of the American Medical Association Health Policy. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read about some of the details. And there's more around this, but just going to read some of the highlights. As the most common conditions for which cannabis was prescribed were non-cancer chronic pain, cancer-related pain, insomnia, and anxiety. But of course, non-cancer chronic pain, cannabis is known as the best inflammation reducer and pain reliever, and that's why Big Pharma is obviously scared of losing that market share. But then to highlight, this study suggests a favorable association between medical cannabis treatment and quality of life among patients with a diverse range of conditions, it concludes. However, clinical evidence for cannabinoid efficient, more studies are required. No, we don't need any more studies. Cannabis should have been descheduled a long time ago, and this just sort of highlights, this is just the latest in a long list of studies supporting removing cannabis from the CSA where it never belonged, and that would fix a lot of problems overnight. You won't even need SAFE because cannabis would be legal. It'd be the best case scenario, but the government won't give up that control. But as more states and countries move to reform their cannabis laws, we have to go the slow but sure route as opposed to getting everything at once, as that seems to be. But if that's not enough, Marijuana Moment shares this one. States that legalize cannabis see reduced tobacco use study finds. Turns out when you legalize cannabis, it doesn't all of a sudden mean that people are just going to go smoke tobacco. No, people actually replace something less healthy with something slightly healthier in some cases. Researchers did find consistent evidence that the adoption of state recreational cannabis laws led to a slight uptick in cannabis use among adults, fair enough, of between about 2 and 4 percentage points depending on the data source, but tobacco didn't follow that trend. There you go. Again, very counterintuitive, but the data don't lie, and so the more studies we get about this, the better. If the apparent substitution effect from cigarettes to cannabis that's being driven by legalization were extended nationally, it could result in healthcare cost savings worth more than $10 billion per year, a study concluded. And this will give you more of an idea as to why big tobacco and big alcohol are looking at cannabis, because they know people are going to turn to the plant the more it becomes normalized. And the less stigma there is attached to it. You can pause to read for a bit more about what the authors had to say, and while the reduction wasn't that large overall, still beneficial. We tried this experiment to show everyone that the sky doesn't fall when cannabis legalization happens, and ending prohibition actually has a lot of benefits to it. As another one unexpected, 3 or more years following the adoption of recreational legalized cannabis, we find that adult tobacco use falls approximately 1.4 to 2.7 percentage points. More beneficial than not. So you can pause to read here, and if that's not enough, more data to shut the prohibitionists up, especially their fear-mongering, is weed legalization in Canada not linked to increasing car crashes. And while I share this original study in my last week's video, this is another publication sharing the data, 420 Intel, and so just relaying that cannabis does not do what all these prohibitionists claim that alcohol does, because cannabis is not alcohol. And so with that, this one from Bloomberg, so nice to see this awareness, but it's funny how these journalists live in a completely different world than most of us. Pot acceptance is climbing. Yeah, no shit. Even as illicit market has grown. And this sort of helps make the argument that we ought to end cannabis prohibition so that we can, sell safer products through legal outlets as opposed to letting the gray market run rampant. A bit more here if you wanted to read about how America's on board. And a lot of America has most likely always been on board, but now they can show it a little more, especially since humans have always self-medicated with this plant. But fortunately, the momentum is taking us in the right direction, slowly but surely. And if that's not enough, we got more propaganda from FoxNews.com. Cases of cannabis laced with fentanyl increasing. This can only come from the black market. There's no way that is coming from legal stores. And so thank you, Dale's report, making a stronger case for legalization and descheduling. Again, rescheduling is what we most likely will get. Descheduling would be the best case scenario, and the need for a regulated market. As police claim to find cannabis laced with fentanyl in Alabama, where there's no recreational legal cannabis, Illinois, where they focus on social equity. What's it doing there? Louisiana, again, where there's no legal recreational cannabis, and New York, of all places, because they did it so badly, and they've invited all the criminals there to take advantage of the opportunity, sadly. And so you cannot make this shit up. Again, just makes a stronger case for ending prohibition at the federal level, even though we're probably not going to get that anytime soon. With that, onto some MSO earnings. Columbia Care reports first quarter 2023 results. Quarterly revenue of $125 million, an increase of 1% year over year. Quarterly gross profit of over $47 million, an increase of 13% quarter over quarter. So nice to see them keeping more profits at least. While quarterly adjusted EBITDA of over $16 million and adjusted EBITDA margin of over 13%. I'm just going to read through through the highlights, not going to spend too much time on this as I'm not trained in finance and don't have that background. So I do invite you to go through this. Link will be in the description if you're interested, but you can check out the first quarter 2023 US GAAP financial highlights and then the top 5 markets by revenue for Q1 and top 5 markets by adjusted EBITDA in Q1. Then if we scroll down to operational highlights, of course, you can pause to read. Proven cultivation expertise and continued improvements, sustained momentum on branding initiatives at retail and product levels, while a bit more capital markets and liquidity highlights, status of pending Cresco Labs transaction. And so while I do not own shares in Columbia Care, I do own shares in Cresco Labs, and I am hopeful. I do want this merger to go through so that I will own the new entity that becomes Cresco Labs and Columbia Care in the future, and they have until June 30th to get that deal done. I do believe that it's in the best interest of both parties, and they're working towards getting that done. But so just bringing you down to this. Of course, you can grab the link in the description if you want to go through more, but fortunately, Cannavestments does share his breakdowns with us, and so I can share what he has to say. Modestly improved Q1 from Columbia Care as cost control efforts begin to show, but a precarious balance sheet and a relatively thin footprint means margins are still low relative to peers, while positive cash flow and profitability remain elusive with a Cresco Labs merger hanging in the balance. And so, of course, I think both companies are working towards having this merger happen because at least once this entity combines, they can then cut costs further and try to compete with the larger tier ones that have a big footprint of dispensaries, of course, but then also hopefully producing cash flow. Now, it's a bit too much to say that they'd be doing this by the end of 2023, but I think the goal at this point would be in 2024 at some point to be producing positive cash flow from operations. Obviously, if they can do it in 2023, the better, but a bit more down here, just if you wanted to pause to read, as Cannavestments added at the bottom there. And so with that, Ayr Wellness reports their first quarter 2023 results. Similar to Columbia Care, I'm really just going to focus on the highlights. However, Cannavestments has not shared his breakdown of Ayr Wellness's Q1 on Twitter yet. Once he does, I will post those in the comments for reference so that you can check those out. And all these results are excluding discontinued operations. And so for what it's worth, I am a shareholder of Ayr Wellness. This is not advice, just relaying the information. But the main reason I own them is because I think in the future they're going to be worth a lot more than they are now. And if you've looked at their share price in the last 2 weeks, if that's any indication of how undervalued they've been, take a look at that and take notes. But for what that's worth, revenue up 18% year over year to $117.7 million, up 3% sequentially, so not bad, excluding discontinued operations. Again, excluding discontinued operations, adjusted EBITDA up 64% year over year to $26.3 million, which is up 9% sequentially. But then they add in here the GAAP loss from operations was $21.7 million, was roughly about $195 million when we add the discontinued operations, compared to $21 million in Q1 2022. But again, they're writing this off in goodwill now. Better to do it now than have to do it in the future. Q1 ending cash balance of $96.5 million. And so with that, just going to bring you through. You can pause to read from the following measures are reported down to I am encouraged, from what the CEO has to say, I'm encouraged to see, down to long term, if you wanted to pause to read. And so this includes first quarter financial summary, excludes results from AZ for all periods. I have to dig a little bit deeper to learn all the details of that, but for what it's worth, you can pause to read to look through here. And it seems based on current market conditions, including the impact of price compression, the company incurred a non-cash goodwill impairment charge of $118 million, which also excludes AZ, reducing the carrying value of goodwill across all reporting units. And I think you write goodwill off sooner so that in the future when you report, you don't have to write off goodwill and take a loss when you're producing cash flow and looking better. From my understanding, I could be wrong. First quarter and recent highlights, you can pause to read for retail updates and leadership updates. You can check that out. Then corporate updates, if you wanted to pause to read, and then financing and capital structure, more here if you wanted to pause to read, especially the recent deal that they made to help ease some of their debt requirements. Very beneficial, especially helping the company give it a bit of breathing room, and then outlook here if you wanted to pause to read. And so with that, some news from TerrAscend as they celebrate the opening of its 5th cookies dispensary in Michigan. And so I'm not a shareholder, but if you're interested in TerrAscend or want to learn more about what's happening in their state and what they're doing there, certainly lots of information here if you wanted to pause to read it, or you can grab the full link about what they're doing. But very competitive state, and good to see them not backing down and taking some of that market share. And so with that, from Sammy J, Viridian capital chart of the week. Q1 sequential quarter revenue decline is a prelude to 2023's revenue deceleration. But I do think it is worth noting that Croptober is a thing where illegal harvests compete with legal harvests in Q4, which is typically the start of winter, and then Q1, which is the end of winter and into the start of spring. And so no doubt that has an impact on sales growth and usually cause for the slowdown. However, going forward, we hope that Q2 and Q3 are a little bit better, especially as we're seeing in certain markets, wholesale prices are going back up because there is an undersupply of cannabis. But for what it's worth, the graph shows the actual or expected sequential revenue growth from the fourth quarter of 2022 to the first first quarter of 2023 for 16 of the top MSOs. And so this is the actual or expected sequential quarterly revenue growth percentage, and it seems like Ascend Wellness, Planet 13, Ayr Wellness, TerrAscend, and Verano are leading the way, at least seeing positive growth, while all these are in the negative. And sadly, I mean, obviously it could be a different story had New York and New Jersey done things differently and wanted the industries to thrive. Obviously, we can't invest, based on what we thought could happen. We invest based on what does happen, and hence why anyone who's found my channel in the last few weeks is at a much better advantage than I am, someone who've invested most of my capital pretty much a year ago. But all that to say is I think the future is very bright, and we've just been going through the trenches thus far. And so Viridian adds, why the slowdown in growth? Many reasons. You can pause to read through. I don't want to make this video too long. And what will it take to reignite the growth? Of course, new rec states, since the states that recently went rec have been abysmal failures. And so fortunately, Missouri is shining the light and leading the way. Maryland coming online soon. Ohio and Pennsylvania are promising. Florida as well. But sadly, legalized markets didn't pan out, and so we're waiting on new ones to come online. So still a when not if scenario, just annoying to wait. And with that, wanted to share this. I did post this in my comments in my last week's video, but I don't know if this source is true from fintel.io, but I would love it to be if this is the case. Just wanted to ask any of you if you can confirm, but it seems as if since the prices have been going all the way down from MSOs, the ETF, and I don't advise investing in this ETF because I would say invest directly in the MSOs that you think are going to be worth more in the future, especially since there's a hefty fee that comes with this one. If this has been true while the prices have been coming all the way down to all-time lows and institutions have just been quietly accumulating, I mean, it's foreshadowing, if anything. So just wanted to share that. Let me know in the comments if you think this is accurate or if you have any way to disprove this, because I want it to be true, but I just don't know. That's why I'm sharing with you guys. Also, love to see Kim Rivers, CEO of TrueLeave, firing back at DAMA Financial. Just spoke to the CEO at DAMA Financial. I'm hopeful they will be issuing a statement into the committee record, making it clear that they do support SAFE in its current form and that it does provide a workable structure for the industry. Appreciate the opportunity to connect and work together. So thank you, Kim, for reaching out to them. Maybe consider taking your business elsewhere, though, if they don't, sort of go back on their statements. But great, can't wait to see it in the committee record. Any explanation for what we witnessed? She says, compliance officer opining as to what a perfect bill may look like instead of expressing the company's support of the current bill, which is essentially her reason for being there. And so wonder if someone paid her to, share what she would love to see as opposed to what we're working with. He was very clear that they support the current bill and that their support did not adequately come through at the hearing. And so that's nice to hear for what it's worth. Link in the description if you want to go through this all. And I will put DAMA's details in the comments again if you wanted to reach out. And I think I'll try and write up a little mock email that you can just copy and paste to use to reach out to them with to make it easier for you. We got this one from DNBC, which at first glance is a very troubling headline, but I'll show you in a moment why we shouldn't be too concerned apparently. As Florida's recreational cannabis to get a court review, what the fuck? Attorney General, quite undemocratic of you, so is submitting a proposed recreational cannabis ballot initiative to the Florida Supreme Court and signaled she will argue that the proposal doesn't meet legal requirements. Why are you so un-American? What the fuck? And so while this is very annoying, as I reported from connoisseurs and from at least, I think it was the government data in Florida, that they had reached enough signatures required. I did find another source that says that they're not there yet. So I'm not sure which one's true. Figured I would share both. But what I wanted to bring you down to is Brady Cobb, who I do know is a lawyer and from Florida. And I want to take his word at least out of this. Is for context, the AG has historically opposed the lion's share of proposed amendments in Florida. The level of opposition is key. Game on. And so didn't know that. This is helpful context, but still the title does read very poorly. And so this is another article sharing Moody brings pot ballot measure to Florida Supreme Court and signals opposition, which is so annoying. Just to highlight what she's going after. Very un-American, very undemocratic, very annoying. And then main thing just to highlight that, yeah, the state Division of Elections website listed 786,000 valid signatures as of Monday afternoon. And so while I do apologize in the past, I shared a source from connoisseurs that said we got there. It's possible that we might not have gotten there yet. I'm not sure, but just sharing this for what it's worth. Regardless, we're close. And again, Brady seems like they can win this. Just depends on the opposition. Boom, I hope they bring their A game. And so with that, connoisseurs sharing, Maryland cannabis operators are going to crush it as they will be able to go from medical to rec and sell to the adult use population. As of July 1st, 2023, the population without access to adult use cannabis in the bordering states and ND is huge. The state that has a long border with PA, Virginia, decent chunk bordering West Virginia and encapsulates DC, as well as borders most of Delaware, which has legalized but will not start sales until 2024. None of these states have rec adult use online yet. And so thank you for that summary and reminder. Connoisseurs.io, except Delaware. Yes, Delaware's legal adult use sales have not started. They will in 2024, though. And so with that, I thought I'd share this one from Green Market Report because GreenThumb Industries apparently facing 10 federal complaints from Teamsters, which is not ideal. And who are Teamsters? Facilities by Unionized Workers has concluded that GreenThumb is still negotiating with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, what a name, over employment terms for many of its workers. Fair enough. Now, I'm not invested in GreenThumb, but no doubt they are the most attractive MSO right now because they're producing free cash flow from operations. But they maintain that these claims are baseless. And so if you're interested, a bit more here if you wanted to pause to read. This is apparently a photocopy of the document. And then a bit more down here. The first of the complaints was filed down to still. The complaints could be a huge issue for GTI. And then a bit more down here if you wanted to pause to read. And then so with that little trip around the world before we end off, as Germany's draft cannabis legislation suggests a 10% THC limit. Are you fucking kidding, Germany? And yearly homegrown restrictions. Talk about taking 10 steps back for no apparent reason whatsoever. What does the latest draft bill mean for the future of German cannabis legalization? What could have been such a great story, just ruined by politics. So annoying. So you can pause to read here if you're more interested, but essentially I found an English version of all the rules for cannabis social clubs, and they're not great. Really just an embarrassment. So you can pause to read all this bit down here. Otherwise, of course, you can grab the link and go through it all. Good news, it seems Germans are infuriated, and hopefully they'll start holding their politicians' feet to the fire. And with that, from the Leafy Street EU, Switzerland has apparently approved another 2 adult-use cannabis pilot trials in Bern and Geneva, which is on top of Zurich, which I believe is the existing trial is happening right now. And so great to see Switzerland expand, and you'd like to think the reason they're expanding that is because the trials are going well. And so more on that, link in the description if you wanted to check that out. While from marijuana.com AU, the pro-establishment Thai political party that championed the liberalization of cannabis won more seats than predicted in Sunday's election. Maybe the U.S. could take notes. How do you want to go about ensuring that you might win an election in the next coming years? Obviously side with an issue that's popular among 91% of Americans, as clearly pro-cannabis party wins big in Thai election to drive a bargain. Someone let the politicians in DC know. And link in the description if you want to check that out. And with that, last one from MJ Stock Trader, as he held a spaces with Republican lobbyist Don Murphy to discuss the status of safe banking. And so it's a very good listen. He highlights a lot of the realities and sadly reminding us that no one except us is really paying attention to this, despite the fact that we know that descheduling is a solution that would go a very long way. But Don provides a lot of good insight and reiterates that while the 45-day period is now in play, it doesn't have to take that long. It could happen sooner, but also always a treat to listen to Don and hear his perspectives and insights. So thank you for that, Don. And forgot about this, but wanted to add, as I have to listen to this too as a shareholder. It's on my list of things to do today, but thank you, Kay Brody, for sharing excellent spaces. Very confident building with regards to where we are at and where we are going with Ayr, especially after that recent announcement of them adjusting and relieving some of their debt, which is going to make them hopefully cash flow positive sooner than later. And again, just how undervalued they've been. They're going to do like $400 million in revenue. And again, that's not profit, but $400 million of revenue. And I don't know, 2 weeks ago, they were valued at like $50 million. Make it make sense. It doesn't. And so, of course, you can grab the link in the recording with the CEO, David Gubert of Ayr Wellness. And so as we continue to navigate through these uncharted waters and face relentless discrimination just because this plant is so good at what it does, the reality is that we're going to have Cresco Labs and Curaleaf report their Q1 earnings, and that'll wrap it up, I think, for most of the Tier 1 MSOs. But the big dates that I'm looking for is end of June, which is going to line up with the Cresco Labs and Columbia Care merger, potentially. That is when that merger has to get done. And if that can line up with some sort of follow-up to the recent SAFE hearing, obviously we would rather have that happen sooner as opposed to having to wait till the end of the 45 days, but mostly looking forward to what's to come, and end of June is potentially a big milestone with the announcement of that merger. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.